Hey, kid. A little young for a bartender, aren't you?
A little old for prom, aren't you?
Everything in here. Why the map?
It's the biggest treasure that's never been found.
5 billion, easy.
But it's just a story.
I beg to differ.
Well, hello everyone. Welcome. I'm so excited. Welcome to Nom Watch Review, part of Nom Talk Network. On this show, we review the latest film drop or throwback celebrating a milestone while eating and drinking our favorite movie snacks and drinks. I'm your host, Jordyn Orozco, and right now I'm enjoying a lovely little steak along with some ribs, some potatoes, mashed potatoes, and some mac and cheese, as well as a wonderful little Truly in my little can here. And I want to introduce our guest for the day. So, as you can see here on the screen, we have our lovely Geek Juice Jen over here. Hello.
Hello, cheers.
Hi. And then we also have Kenji, who I just met tonight, and I'm so excited to be talking about this movie with. Say hi, Kenji.
Oh, hello, everybody.
With his wonderful action figures in the background, let me tell you, because those are amazing. And I wish I had that, but I still live with my parents, and it would be really weird. Basically, let's talk about what we're eating and drinking. So, Jen, go ahead and take it away. What are you eating and drinking?
Well, I finished a Negroni from earlier, and I went to, because I'm feeling a little spicy about tonight, I changed it to a little ginger mule just to set the tone. And I'm hitting for dinner, I'm hitting for pho.
Well, excuse me. I love mules. Mules are great. Kenji, what's going on with you?
Well, I was snacking earlier on these popped water releases called Asha Pops. They're really, really tasty. Really tasty. They're low calorie and stuff. And I'm just chilling on good old fashioned water.
The best drink out there. It really is.
I know. I got some too. I was like, I gotta hydrate. Gotta hydrate all the day. Today, if you all don't know, but you all do know, we are talking about the film Uncharted, which stars the amazing and gorgeous and beautiful Tom Holland, as well as Mark Wahlberg, and some wonderful and amazing actors that are in this film. Did you all see it? Did you go into the movies and see it?
Oh, yeah.
I know, it was weird, right? Like, it's weird going back to the movies, right? I know, for me, there's, I went to the movie theater in Monrovia, where it's like a dine-in movie, but on Tuesdays, they have, like $5 movies, where all the movies are $5, everything, like entrees, like appetizers, drinks, they're all $5. And so but I didn't do it on Tuesday, obviously I did it on Friday, but doing that, it just felt kind of weird, because I was like, I haven't been to the movies in like 2 years, but it was really fun just going back to the movies and doing that. I don't know. What was the experience like for you both?
I threw myself to the drive-in. I'm a new pup mom. So having the Finland drive-in in Los Angeles where I'm at is dog friendly. So super kind of rad of being able to, you have to close your car and everything, but we got to drive out and like bring dinner with us, have the two dogs just fall asleep while we're sitting there, just like running through the emotional hurdles that ensued. But the drive-ins, they're only doing the single movie one, so you can't do the double feature, which used to be the best thing. But they're all $10 tickets, so it's still pretty cheap. It's like a $20 date night. You're pretty good to go.
Yeah.
I ended up seeing it up in Burbank, or was it Glendale? Oh, the Americana up in Glendale. And I got really lucky because you know how like AMC has like discounted matinee tickets? I did that, and oddly enough, because it was also a matinee, my girlfriend and I saw it, and there was like maybe 9 other people in the theater besides us, and they were like nowhere near us. So I felt really comfortable. I got to eat my popcorn without tripping out or anything like that. It was good.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah. And so like for me, it was like, okay, cool. I get to go back to the movies, but also there was like a purpose, right? Like I didn't just I wasn't like, oh, I just want to go see this movie because I can just wait till all movies come out on like some streaming platform. But for this one, for a long time, I've been actually for pretty much my entire life, I've been like an Xbox person, right? And so Uncharted has been a a PlayStation like exclusive, right? Much like a lot of the other games are out there. And so for me, I think I had a PlayStation for probably about like maybe 6 months out of my entire life. And with that, it was only for like The Last of Us and all that stuff. But I always saw Uncharted as a way to be like, oh, maybe this is a reason why I want to do PlayStation. And I remember doing it was like a Nathan Drake versus Lara Croft thing when, we did that. And I'm a huge Lara Croft fan. And so like all the Tomb Raider things like came out on Xbox and I was like, oh, great, this is great. But when I found out that Uncharted was coming out in a movie, I was like, I want to go see that because I want to get a PlayStation. I want to start that, right? And so for me, like the movie, plus on top of like Spider-Man, aka Tom Holland, being Nathan Drake, right? But like me having a specific vision, which is like me watching like Uncharted YouTubes, right? Like just watching it and being like, I don't know if Tom Holland can do that, right? What were your feelings moving up to Uncharted, and what are both of your experiences with it? So we'll start with Kenji.
I personally have been a huge Uncharted fan. Like I've played it since the first one. I even played Lost Legacy. I even played Golden the Best on the what is it, the PS Vita, the short-lived PS Vita.
Oh wow!
It's the modern day Indiana Jones. There's no other way to describe it. It's fantastic. When you first go into the first game, you're not really expecting like this fantasy aspect to come into it, but sure enough, you're dealing with that, kind of like how Indiana Jones does. But I personally was a little bit worried because I was afraid we were going to get more Peter Parker as Nathan Drake going in, because like, I'm going to be perfectly honest, I was one of those guys that was like, I see the picture of Nathan Drake, I see the picture of Tom Holland, even in the shirt, I'm going like, so it's like I was a bit iffy, but I was also worried about there's some certain things that Tom Holland does with his acting that I was worried might get in the way of my enjoyment. But actually, I enjoyed the hell out of it. Like, oh my god, honestly, I kind of want to see it again.
Yeah. What about you, Jen?
Going into it, I was incredibly hesitant. I love Tom Holland and I love Mark Wahlberg, and before we get off going crazy about my feels about all of this, I thought Tom Holland did a great Rihanna. Okay, like I'm not saying Tom Holland is a bad anything. Like he can pull out of left field and still succeed. But for me, I was not thinking that this poor kid, because we've been introduced to baby Nathan. You know what I mean? Like back with Nathan Morgan, I think it was, back in the orphanage in Uncharted 4, we see him, we see that character. So for Tom Holland to come in and kind of like put a name to that face, even though we've played through it, I was very hesitant. And then Marky Mark coming on top, I was sitting there just, this is going to be more Charlie from Italian Job. I never saw him as Sullivan. I never saw him as something coming forward of like, if you're going to do the pull, I would have cast differently initially. But after I saw it, other than the casting, oh my gosh, it hit all the cinematic things I needed from the original games. And it still gave those really big scenes, like who puts a freaking helicopter? And then I was like, you know what we need? We need a pirate ship. Like this is Uncharted. Like this is what we come to know and love. You know what I mean? Like that's so hesitant but hopeful.
Yeah, absolutely. And just so everybody's aware, the spoilers are for real. So if you haven't seen it, shut it off, do whatever you need to do if you haven't seen the movie, but these spoilers are dark and treacherous right now, so just want to let everybody know that. But I think too, for me, so the expectation, I don't think I had any, which is pretty good, going into a movie, because I never played the games, right? Like I don't want to say I'm not a fan of Uncharted, but I haven't really had that moment to sort of like build up my fandom to this Uncharted, and I'm pretty sure if I did play the games, right? I went with a friend who actually was a huge fan of Uncharted, right? Loved Nathan Drake, loved all that. And he had a great time. He just thoroughly enjoyed it, and thoroughly wanted to see it again, which he did. It was along the lines of like, yeah, you're right. It was a modern day Indiana Jones, but also it was contemporary to the point where the casting was relevant, I think, to how people would want to see them, right? And for me, it was like, I had a vision of what Nathan Drake was, but this movie sort of dispelled that. And it sort of made me rethink, right? Much like, I would say much like the new Tomb Raider was for Lara Croft, right? There's been the Angelina Jolie Lara Croft, right? But then there was like the new one that came out, and it was very close and super personal to the new Tomb Raider games that have come out, which I'm a huge fan of, right? And so I think this did the same exact thing. And not to mention like Tati Gabrielle, who I'm a huge fan of, right? So the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, huge freaking fan of that movie, and she came out in this as the freaking villain, and I was like, yes, I love you, woman of color, like in a position of power, like doing all this stuff, controlling your own thing, right? And it was awesome. So on this channel, we rate the movies from 1 popcorn bucket to 5 popcorn buckets. What are we giving Uncharted? How do we feel? What's going on? Jen,
I have
what
2.
are your popcorn buckets?
I have
Okay.
salty and sweet, so I'm gonna do a caramel corn. My caramel corn first is gonna be if you haven't played the games, right? Like you're not a Nathophile. Like you're not sitting here knowing who Elena Chloe, but you're very excited. Like maybe similar with the Lara Croft. You're an Xbox guy, but you're looking for. I think I rated 4 to 5 popcorn buckets. Like I think if you're not completely absorbed into it, I think 4 to 5. I think if you're an addict, it's gonna be closer to like a 2.5. Only we'll get into why. We'll get into 2.5.
Yeah,
My salty
sure.
bucket is 2.5, and I'm gonna just sit over here.
She's like, it's kettle corn, but add salt. All right,
Because
Kenji.
I feel like both are important. You know what I mean? Like if you've
Yeah.
seen it, then like
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I actually kind of I'm gonna have to echo what Jen said, because I'm right there with her, because like I went into it, you know, as a Nathophile, you know, I was all about Uncharted. I went into it with kind of low expectations, but I also feel like because I went into it with low expectations, that's why I liked it so much. But I would probably say though, like if you were a hardcore Uncharted fan, I would right there with you, 2 out of 5, maybe 3 out of 5. But if you're new and you have no idea, like my girlfriend had absolutely she had no idea what she was getting into with the movie. She doesn't play video games and stuff, and she literally came out of it going like, and she's kind of a film snob, and even she was like, this is a good movie. Like I really, really enjoyed the hell out of this movie. The action is spectacular and all. I mean, we can dive into it more, but yeah, I would definitely say if you're not familiar with the series, 4, maybe even 5 out of 5 popcorn.
Sure. This is hilarious because you're like, yeah, we like both of you have like seen it, played it, done it. And I'm like, I haven't seen it, played it, done it. And I went into that film being like, you know, translating video games into films is a really hard thing to do just in general, period. And I think like we've seen that with a lot of other, you know, past things. But for me, I think putting aside the hotness of Tom Holland, right? Like putting that aside, I would for sure be like at a 3.5 or a 4. Like I didn't think it was the best film. I didn't think it was the best video game film, but I did feel like, I mean, we're gonna go into details of why, right? Like why are we giving these popcorn ratings, right? But I did feel like overall, it was a good attempt at trying to portray, I would even say, the most recent games into sort of like a cinematic like feature that people can be like, oh, like I can relate to that, or no, I can't relate to that because I don't see how helicopters can carry Spanish galleons in the air and then crash into each other, right? Like, so I think it was a good mix of like video game versus like reality and what actually happens. And so I feel like I would do like a 3.5 or 4, just at least for me, just so that way, you know, people can get an understanding of like somebody who has no, you know, like sort of thought about it. Okay, so let's talk about why. So the first thing is, let's talk about the story. Now, my friend had some really interesting things to say about the story, and I sort of delved into how many sort of Uncharted video games there have been. What did you all think about the story? What are your sort of objective things about like how the movie played out? And how it sort of flowed. So let's start with Kenji on this one.
I actually felt that it follows exactly what I would expect from an Uncharted adventure. Like it starts off with our boy Nate in a really sticky situation. In this case, he's hanging outside of a plane, which is right out of Uncharted 3, and probably the best part of any of the Uncharted games leading up to the most pièce de résistance moments of Uncharted 3, which is wandering through the desert. But like I would say like but then you get to see like a little bit of background. It sets up the relationship with Sully, just like how it would in the game. Like I felt like all the beats that you expect from the game, you see in the movie. And like even with like all the twists that they have and stuff, like things like that. The only thing that it didn't have was like the supernatural element, but that's kind of more like what Uncharted 4 did, and it was more grounded in reality. So I feel like it really does justice. I feel like it does a pretty good job at doing justice to the video games as far as like my personal experience with it.
Sure.
For sure.
I think I would echo that. I think the only thing really actually, oh, you hit all my notes. I would go that the story with the brother, the changes for that threw me up a little bit, because I feel like in Uncharted 4, so much of it is contingent on their relationship with Sam, both Sully and Nate's. And having that switch a little bit, and all of a sudden being like, no, we're aware that Sam exists, but we're just gonna retcon that and just hide the canon of like, that was a lot for me in the story. But other than that, I think I really liked the story. I really liked the beats, the pacing, felt like the games, but I think it felt like very Charted territory. If we could go in there, all the best parts of the story we'd seen in other games. So it's like you're saying, Uncharted 3, we got but we charted it. Like, we've done that. And that's what I love so much to expect from these games, is something so asinine and so ridiculous that we somehow base in logic and we accept it as fact, and we're like, oh no, but we have to shoot a cannon out of a helicopter. Like, it's like so that part of the story I think they really got, but the switches they made and the charting is a little preconceived.
Yeah.
I think.
So I just wanted to address some of the questions we've been getting on the live, so that way we can address that. So questions for the room. Do you feel like the film did justice just like the game?
Yes.
Oh, so is the video, they're asking if the movie is good like the video games? And yeah, I would say so, yeah.
Okay.
I think I struggled more accepting it as a prequel than I did as like a seventh installment. Like, it felt like, because the games are so cinematic in their nature anyway, they kind of feel like watching a movie, even though you're playing. Like, it's one of my favorites for couch culture. Like, you can have one person with a controller, but everyone feels engaged in what's happening. And I feel like that's something that we translate into the movie, where it felt just as engaging to sit as a movie watcher as it did as a video game player, which is cool.
Sure. That was Q's question. I just want to say hi to AO Lins, Q, True Limerick, Katie in LA, and Udaheim Cosplay. Just wanted to say hi to all y'all. Thank you for watching, supporting. We love you all. True Limerick said, he's just not Nathan.
Oh, God.
And I mean, so when I watched it, I was like, I get that so right off the bat, I knew it was a prequel, because I was like, he's getting his ass beat 100% of the time. Like, there's no, like, and it wasn't until he was on the Spanish galleon, like, beating people up. But even Pati Gabrielle was like beating I was like, this is a prequel, because you clearly are not Nathan Drake, because it's like, maybe it's maybe it's like you trying to, find yourself and do all that. But like, even when he was like, they were doing the heist in the, at the party, like in the museum, I think it was, he like was getting his ass beat. And I'm like, Tom Holland, come on. Like, this
so that one's an interesting one, is if that actually scene is ripped out of Uncharted 4, it's like straight from it kind of deal. Except Toddy is not.
The auction heist is 100%.
Right,
yeah,
but he's
which
older
is great.
at that point. So we've seen 40-year-old Nate do this before, and like he still gets his ass beat. Like, it wasn't easy for
Nothing
him.
changes. Nate doesn't get any. He's not like a great Zen master that gets better over time. No, he just flails through the air more when he jumps, and he gets his face beaten even more. It's
well, in 4 they even did the thing where like his left shoulder catches more when he's climbing up, just being like, and you'll have him grab it every once in a while. He's like, this used to be easier 10 years ago. No, like, I know. It only gets worse.
This is great because I was like, my Xbox primate brain was like, I don't feel like Laura gets her ass beat this much, right? And I'm like, Laura's you know what I mean? I'm like, I'm strong, female, empowerment, all this stuff. I know you're rich and you're white, but it's great. But like, I'm like, Nate, man, like, can you just at least throw a punch or two? Like, is this like a thing? But then my friend really did like a good explanation, and he was like, that's his personality. Like, that's who he is. And that's what makes him Nathan Drake, is the fact that like, he comes from this, but then ultimately at the very end, he gets exactly what he needs to get out of each game, right? Just going back to the comments, on a scale of 1 to 5 popcorn buckets, how hard is it to ignore Tom Holland's hotness? Kenji, I know this is gonna be a little tough, but Jen, what is it?
I was really excited that he was hot, because I didn't like him as Nathan. So it was very nice that it was there. I felt like Nathan Drake and Sullivan were not in the movie, and I felt like what we got with the Lost Legacy, and we don't have Nathan Drake in an Uncharted movie, but it feels like it. I felt like this was 6. Like if you had told me that, okay, so Nate and Elena have their daughter, right? If you were telling me that this Tom Holland was playing the son that was trying to date that daughter, I'd buy it 100%. Like that is who I see this kid as.
Yeah. I mean, it's like one thing. So it's like one thing to see it's one thing to see Tom Holland, right? But then you have like Marky Mark, right? Like the Mark Wahlberg, like in this and then you're like, I don't know if I like this movie for what it is, or if it's the fact that like, and this is just for me, it's like you have two good-looking dudes playing this like franchise, right? Where like Marky Mark or like Sully's supposed to be older than he is. Tom Holland clearly is supposed to be older than he is, but they made it to where they're actually pretty attractive, right? And
I think it's the first time I'd ever consider Sullivan attractive.
Oh, come on. That scruff and that Hawaiian shirt, that's 10 out of 10 hotness right there. I don't know what you're talking about.
10 out of 10 horn dog.
That's great. That was great. Oh my god, that was great. Kenji, what do you think? 1 out of 5 popcorns, Tom Holland?
Well, the thing about that is, like, I guess I don't know so much about hotness, but I did think that Tom Holland was a little bit more baby-faced than I was expecting. Like, and so like even in the beginning of the movie, you see him like falling like out of the sky, and then it cuts to 15 years earlier, and a part of me was like, are they just gonna use Tom Holland? Because he looks exactly he should look exactly the same. I mean, it's supposed to be Tom, like it's supposed to be Nate when he's like 13 or 10 years old, and it's like, he already looks like he's 15. So
just light him differently, it'll be fine.
I know. I was like, in that bar scene where he's mixing drinks, I was like, sir, are you old enough to be mixing drinks? And like, I was like, I know you're Spider-Man, but Spider-Man's also in high school. Like, you know what I mean? It was a scene where it was like, I can't, right?
So in the drive-in, we were watching Tom Holland pour a Negroni, and we were watching him pick up a high school backpack on this, and I was like, I can't. It's just like,
you're like, no.
Am I allowed to think you're attractive? Because I feel like no right now. Like,
He's borderline illegal.
He's gotta be an adult.
Yeah, borderline illegal. Katie in LA said, video game movies are always handicapped. It's hard to recreate the game experience to placate the fans while being fresh enough to win over new viewers. I think so too. I think it's really hard to write a screenplay, let alone directing, right? A franchise or a movie that's gonna sort of seek out the people like me, right, who haven't played the video game versus people like you who have played the video game. You're like you have these expectations of what Uncharted should be, right? And then it comes out and you're like, no, like, I don't know if that was right. And that's exactly how I was for Tomb Raider, right? It was like, oh, I don't necessarily agree with this, but oh, this is great. Oh my gosh, right? And so I feel like that's a true comment. What do you all feel?
I'm along that thing. Even seeing Nolan North, who is our social material, you know what I mean? Like he is our guy, and then seeing him in the film, you're sitting there like, why is Baby Drake talking to old Drake? Hold on, like there's fourth wall things happening here, and that was something that was really interesting. Of like hearing it, I didn't recognize him at first, so I had to tell Dustin, I was like, I know that guy's voice, but I don't know who he is. And Dustin's like, well, he's got to be a cameo, and I'm like, his voice is so familiar. I'm an idiot sitting here like, and then having that like Nathan be Nathan, and then the Fortnite voice of Nathan Drake coming in too. I was like, it sounds like I'm not gonna fight it if we're gonna get a whole new slew of Nathan Drake infiltration. I'm like, I want a Nathan Drake shirt. Nobody's made me that in a long time. I have to get those at Comic-Con and wait in line. Like, please put those in Target. So feed it, do it. However we get all of our fandoms in the same seats, let's do it. Like, absolutely.
What'd you think, Kenji?
I forgot the question. I'm sorry.
No, it's basically just the comment is it's really hard to recreate video game movies because of, placating fans and then trying to get the people that haven't seen it. Yeah,
I actually do find that that's 100%. Oh, like I can't even imagine. Like, I mean, I feel like that's the trap that a lot of video game movies fall into. Like they want to do enough fan service that they keep the fans happy, obviously, the people who have invested, X amount of years into this franchise, but they also want to bring in new audience members and even bring in possibly new players to their video game franchise. Like I mean, a great example of this is the most recent Mortal Kombat movie. Like that, it felt like tried to do nothing but fan service, and unfortunately, it fell completely short because it didn't really necessarily bring a fresh story to the table that could actually bring in new fans. It just tried to placate the fans that it already has. And I would feel like with this movie, with this movie, I feel like they do enough of the set pieces that made Uncharted. You know, like with the plane and with the Spanish galleon, the auction house, all that stuff. Like those were all kind of like bits. Like those are like the movies is all, in a weird way, is kind of like the greatest hits album of like Uncharted in a weird way.
So I'm like, what? How are you gonna possibly do a sequel? Like we've seen it. Like you just gave us all the good stuff. Like where's?
Yeah, exactly. So like, and of course, how you were saying like the cameo from Nolan North. I mean, I've heard Nolan North's voice so many times because of video games and other things as well, and I kind of gotten a chance to like see what this guy looks like. So the second he said, "You look like shit," I was like,
"Yeah." Then he's like, "Oh, I've done something like that." I was like, "Yes."
What's wrong with you? I'm like, no.
Wait, Nolan North is the one that does Batman, and then that does the
Oh my gosh, he's got a laundry list. He's like everybody's guy.
Wait. So he does the BioShock, the third one, right?
Yeah, he's Booker. He's Booker in BioShock 3.
He is so fine, and his voice when him and Elizabeth sing that song, I was hooked. And then I found out he did Batman's voice in the Arkham trilogy, right?
I thought that was Kevin Conroy.
Okay, maybe it was him, but he did Batman in another one. And I started to realize that there's people that are like on TV and film that I'm like, I've heard you in Destiny. Oh, I've heard you in Batman. And I'm like, how have I not known this? But Nolan North is one of those where it's like, I've played multiple games where I've heard your voice and I'm like, oh, it makes sense. Like, this is what you do, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's. I feel like it's bread and butter.
I don't know. I think you got the intrigue.
Just saying.
I just kind of want it.
Okay, so let's get back to Uncharted just really quick. So how do we feel about the selection of actors? I know we've briefly talked about Mark Wahlberg. We've briefly talked about Tom Holland. How do we feel about all the other ones? How do we feel about Nathan's brother? How do we feel about Tati Gabrielle? So I know she sort of, with the friend that I went with, he was like, she reminded me of the woman
Nadine.
in Uncharted. Yes,
Nadine.
with Thor, with the person with the army. Was that necessary? How do we feel about that? How do we feel about Chloe? Like, what are our thoughts?
It's a long time till we meet Nadine right now. So I think we're like 12 years out or something from when we're meeting Tom, which I believe prior to the movie would have been like 1990, right? So we're not even meeting Nadine until 2010-ish. So we got a whole old me to get through there. So in that, I think they needed to have a strong female character from the beginning, and we meet Elena later down the line. So we had to have a Chloe in there. And I was a little surprised we didn't have a Chloe cameo from the original, because her voice actress is such like nerd goddess. Like, she's in everything. I was kind of expecting her to walk past at some point. But I think we stole and we robbed from Tati. I think she was absolutely incredible in the role she did. I couldn't recast that one. Like, I couldn't give you somebody to do that better, but I would have really loved to see her in it more, because I think her performance was so fun, and I think she brought something unique to the cinematic universe of Uncharted, and now she's gone, and I'm upset about it, because Nadine would have been again. So I think that's I would have loved to see her as Nadine. I initially saw her and was hoping that for the trailer and the posters and stuff, but I loved her performance. I loved her character. I wish she had been cast differently so we could have had more from her, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought that they cast everyone. I feel like the casting was really good, but there were certain people that just didn't get to really spread their wings. Like, I feel Antonio Banderas was completely underutilized the entire film. And he's a phenomenal actor too. And when he plays a villain, he can play a great villain. Yep. So I was really hoping to see more of that evilness from him, so that way when he suddenly gets offed by by Nadine, it's like it's almost like one of those whoa moments, because it kind of just seems like a really grumpy rich guy, and he doesn't seem very threatening. I love the henchmen that they gave us. They were great. I honestly I feel like the casting was really, like, other than like Sully and Nate, like it was really like spot on. Really, the casting was spot on, but the actors weren't utilized enough. That's the way.
I don't think I would even screw it on Tom and on Mark, because I think they actually had some really good chemistry together. Like, as a buddy cop feature between the two, I would have bought it. But it's just, we're so familiar. Like, this isn't like we've had one game. You know what I mean? Like, we've done 4, and those are hours that we've invested with this man, like this gentleman in his life and his family. So I felt very much, I was trying to ask my friend, because I couldn't remember the actual actor they had there, but I think it's Kurt Russell. Do you remember the line readings from Star Wars where Han Solo wasn't cast correctly yet? Like, Harrison Ford wasn't even on the scene yet. And then they had the line readings with the characters that weren't supposed to be Carrie Fisher and stuff. And it was like, this is the same script that we know. And I guess you're good actors and you're delivering a line and that you're doing the thing. I can see you do your thing. But at the same time, I hate it and stop. And that's kind of how I felt with Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg. I'm like, you're delivering a script, you're delivering lines, and I can hear through you that these are the characters I know and love. But I'm physically seeing it the minute you stop. Just let Chloe talk about it.
You're making me ill. I feel like if it was like a Sam Hunt and like playing Sully, and maybe like a Mark Wahlberg playing playing Nathan Drake, it would have been perfect.
It was seeing Italian Job too, Donald Sutherland and Mark Wahlberg, and I was like, "We just do it again. Just don't kill him off this time. Give him a chance."
It would have been great. It would have been great. And I mean, I get what they were doing. I get they were trying to make it a prequel, but you could have even done something a little bit more older than like Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg. I get that Mark Wahlberg is like in his 40s, like early 50s, and like, but he doesn't look like it. Mark Wahlberg looks like he's in his like early 40s, late 30s, right? Because he's just
he looks like where we left Nathan Drake last time. Like, I believe you have a teenage daughter, but it's also like, really? All right.
Got a few kids, right? And then you're like, oh, you're supposed to play somebody. Got it, but it doesn't visually make sense to me. And so that was what I was struggling with, I think, most of the time. I was like, Tom Holland doesn't seem like somebody that would be that and if he's watching this, I love you, Tom Holland, you're the best.
We love you.
Yeah, we do love you.
Call me.
You did it great,
Call me. You're great.
We're being told we have to be critical, okay?
Look, Umbrella was your best performance.
It was,
but
so
I
good.
feel it was great. But I feel like there could have been somebody that was a little bit more mature than Tom Holland to play Nathan Drake, even at a younger age, because it just seemed like it was like, you know, like I said, Spider-Man meets Indiana Jones, but then it was like, oh, like you kept a lot of the Spider-Man and then you just got the whip. You know what I mean? So
it feels like we got caught in between of like, I remember like 10 years ago, we had like fan cast of if we can't have Nolan North be the actual actor for his voice character, well then give us Nathan Fillion. And Nathan Fillion even was like, sure, pander, here's a short. And we're like, no, we like it. That's good. Like, sure, yes. Like, how do we sign on for more? And so I think once we saw Uncharted hitting the scenes for the movie set, you're sitting there like, okay, but what do you mean, Tom Holland?
What? Great.
Like,
what?
It's like, I mean,
exactly.
I remember when they first announced Uncharted, like years ago, Mark Wahlberg was like the first name that was attached to it. They didn't say who he was going to be, but we all assumed that he was going to be Nate. We all assumed, because it kind of makes sense to put him in Nate's shoes. So it was kind of surprising to find out, oh no, he's going to be Sully. And it was kind of interesting, because it was kind of like trying to tell yourself, okay, everything that you've been expecting for the last 2-3 years, it's not there anymore. You got to.
Yeah.
You also mentioned something about like Tom's acting. And that was something, one of the parts, it's really minute, but one of the things that I have a problem with is that when he shouts, when he screams, he becomes very Marty McFly. And it's like, hoist the sails, raise the anchor, here we go!
Help me! And I was like, I want to draft him, that's too whiny.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you mean? Yeah, like it was just yeah. I do want to read this comment from Q, and it's directed towards Kenji, and it's beautiful. I don't know about you, but Kenji looks like a long hair version of Ezra Miller.
Oh.
I am in love with that comment. I'm in love with that comment.
Thank you. I've
No,
actually been
you're the
gotten
Flash. Period.
I've actually gotten that a lot, and I actually really like that. I just don't choke my fans out though.
Yeah, that part.
Anyways, that part.
Yeah. So let's talk about references in the game. Were there any Easter eggs, any like references that you got from the movie? This is directed to both of you. I don't fucking know, right? Like I haven't played the games. I will say this movie inspired me to buy a PlayStation when it's available because I don't have a PlayStation. I have an Xbox and a Switch, and I'm like, I'm gonna just round out the collection. So when it becomes available, I'm getting a PlayStation. I'm downloading Uncharted so I can play all of them. I know there's like a huge like bundle where you can play like all of them, so I'm gonna do that. Yeah. But were there any Easter eggs, any sort of like references that you got in this movie from the game that you were like, this was really great, or it could have done without that?
I liked the puzzles. I liked the postcards because that felt very much of like you're always collecting things throughout the game. You don't necessarily know what the whole picture is. So when he's flipping through his postcards with his brother the whole time, it felt very similar to that. Mm-hmm. But I feel like all of the big hits were Easter eggs of like all like the Spanish Galleon, like all of the major cinematic masterpieces we saw that actually make it need to be seen on a giant screen. Like usually you could see it on your TV and it's fine, but Uncharted actually is one of those you want to see on the big screen. And I feel like those are all of our Easter eggs. Like all of the hidden things are like, but they're hidden because you made us grind them for 16 hours and like nothing was easy in those games. So like
we spent time.
Yeah, well, like you spent like 32 hours finding out that you're fighting Yetis, and then you get 2 hours of your life where you're like, they're not Yetis. And you're like,
wait, spoilers! No, I'm just kidding. The game's been out for years.
No, I will say like that. Yeah, it's all of the Easter eggs they had were just all the major set pieces in the movie. Yeah. The only thing that could really, the only quote unquote Easter egg would probably is Nolan North making his cameo. Other than that, I wouldn't really say that there weren't a whole lot of Easter eggs. I was keeping my eyes open. I was trying to see. Especially that during that auction scene, I kept my eyes wide open. I was trying to find any artifact that might like allude to like a future adventure, and like the only one that I think, other than like the ring on his necklace and like I don't even think and like yeah and Nolan North, there wasn't really.
Chloe was totally in it. She just walks past and we all missed it. We're so distracted by Tom.
And his hotness. Tom's hotness just distracted us the whole time.
Just shirtless. There were some scenes that I was like, Tom, you don't need to be shirtless, like searching over the postcards, bro. Like, you don't need to do that. I get that you're in some exotic area, but you don't need to do that. I like it.
It's really not an excuse,
it's
though, because
great.
Nathan Drake does not get naked in those games nearly enough. Like, it
Ever.
just doesn't.
So that's what I'm super disappointed about.
We find out he's gotten naked with other women, and then we have to deal with the consequences of that, but we don't get to see it. Like, that's not. What is that? Witcher chose you. Like,
terrible. Like, if we can see Lara Croft in booty shorts and a crop top, I want to see Nathan Drake at least shirtless. Right. Like, I want to see him shirtless at least for 2 scenes each game. Like, that's all I want. Right.
And that's what I call in a movie scene. That's a girlfriend pander. That's like, you don't know anything about this, but there's Chris Evans with his abs. And you're like, 15 seconds of that gets somebody 2 hours. Like, you got it. Like, just wash it.
That's why the Marvel movies did so well. Period.
Abs. Like,
we need to have sexy dudes on screen. Otherwise, of course, I feel like I'm such a sexist person saying the girls weren't going to sit down long enough for this movie. But it's like, I don't know.
Oh,
except they might though. Like, Chloe is awesome. Like, we didn't get Nadine, we didn't get Elena yet, but Elena is like the female. Isn't the creator of Uncharted say she's the female version of Nathan Drake? Like, we have some strong female badasses. We only get one alive. Only one's alive at the end of this one. Hang in there.
So can we talk about? Okay, this is just a perspective that I had. Can we talk about how I felt like from the beginning of the movie, and this may be different from the video games, but I was like, so so I used to be an anthropology major like in high school, and I just used to want to do archaeology, right? And then you find out that like the Indiana Jones and the Lara Crofts, those are the most illegal ways to do archaeology, period. Like, you're not supposed to freaking take anything. You're supposed to notify
Don't you know permits take forever though?
Yeah, and I was like, what? Right, it's like that realization where you brought up. So it was weird watching this because I was like, Nathan Drake is a thief. Like, he's not like somebody that does this for the glory or does this for the record. Like, he does it because there's money. But then, as my friend said, who watched it with me, at the very end, he's like, oh, like, this is actually something that should be treasured and valued because it's connected somehow to his story or his journey, right? How did you all feel about that? I know, like, for me, like, it was tough watching that, but at the end of the day, I was like, oh, he kind of learned his lesson, right? Like, he kind of learned what's going on, and then that propels him to do better, you know?
I cannot remember her name, but there was a woman from his childhood that like instilled this like adventuring in him and like this expedition love. And I think it was when Sam was absent in his life in the orphanage. And so there was like this idea of what adventuring could be and what those expectations for the expeditions could look like. And I think we get that in the game very differently than we got in the movie, because the movie, we changed Sam, we changed the whole like I think it's like mother's dead, absent father is changed to, they just address it as their parents aren't around. And like, you've kind of changed this kid's upbringing, pulled him out of an orphanage that his older brother is living life and leaving him alone in. And starting off from that, I think he might not have had the same connection to humility necessarily, but in the games it always seemed like he never got the glory. Like, even if he was close to it, no. And if anybody was going to, Chloe's going to take it from you, right? At that point, where you're like, oh my gosh, we might make some, did you see this? And then Chloe's like, no, I already have like a whole press junket about it. I never figured it out.
No, it's 100% like where it is. Like that's the thing about Nate is that, I feel like a lot of adventuring stories that you hear, like they always end up finding the cash out, and they end up living, their lives are changed forever. But that was the thing about Nate, is that even though he went on all these adventures, and which sure, like maybe some adventures he probably ended up walking away with whatever the fuck he was going to look for. The adventures that we end up seeing in the video games and stuff, he never wins. He never wins. He never wins. He never gets the treasure. Nobody gets the treasure technically, and it's all about like, it's kind of like one of those, but the real treasure was the memories we made along the way.
Yeah, the friends you took home. You got a wife, like you're gonna take that counts, right? Like,
I stole your boat, and we made memories along the way.
Right.
A dysfunctional father figure and a girl I married in a budget wedding. This counts, right?
Dysfunctional, more like crazy psychopathic murdering father. Like,
See,
people
I'll take
have actually
that.
done. This is a complete sidebar about the video games, but people have actually determined that compared to the enemies that Nathan Drake is fighting, Nathan has killed far more people than the people that he's killing.
It's brutal.
Pub Quiz Lady said, in regards to the PlayStation bundle packs, probably for you exclusively, the bundle is stupid cheap and crazy good for anyone else in the same boat. So, great. Thank you for letting me know. I'm going to buy the bundle pack because I want to play all these games. I want to know what Nathan Drake's story is. True Limerick said the cross from the auction is from 4, but so is the entire scene. So does that count?
Other than Sam being the waiter there, it's like,
right.
And she's not Nadine, and you're like, okay, all right. I've seen this scene, but okay.
Yeah, I did thoroughly enjoy the puzzles along the way. I think that was very indicative of a video game sort of movie, where it was like, but also it sort of played into the fact that like they all are of course going to have trouble trusting each other because they're thieves, right? Like that's their tell, right? Like that's what they do. And so when it's that scene where they're like, you know, or it's heaven and hell, and they're like yelling at Mark Wahlberg, they're yelling at to give him the cross, and he's like, all right, well, you know what, if you fuck me over, like I'm gonna blah blah blah. And then he's like, they're like, okay, well, he's not gonna do it. And then Chloe's like, hold on. and then the cross drops, right? And you're like, oh, and it's like character development, right? It's character development for those of us that haven't seen it, right? That haven't spent hours, right? Like involving themselves in these characters. And I feel like that was such an important part of the movie, especially for me, where it was like, I don't just want to see a spitting image of a video game. I want to see like how this sort of plays out. And it was simplistic enough for me where I was like, cool, like I can see that. But it also kind of pissed me off because I was just like, Mark, like, you're just an asshole. Like, you're just an asshole the entire time. Like, you don't care. And then it wasn't until the very end when he was like, he threw the bag of gold at Tati, and I was like, oh, all right.
That pissed me off so bad. Their resolution after that, I was like,
yeah,
I've
like,
never seen a friendship recover that fast.
No,
Not once.
well,
that
well,
guy is telling you
like,
nothing about the gold in his pockets. Nothing.
that part. And it was like, oh yeah, we're cool, right? Okay, cool. Because I have this bar of gold. Oh, and I have this bar of gold. Oh, and I have, and I was like, that's not how you resolve friendships. Like that's not what you do. Like when I get into a fight with my friend, I like to talk it out. I don't just give them a present and I'm like, okay, you're good, right? Cool, we can just like end it. So, but I don't know. I don't know how their relationship is in the video game. I don't know how that works.
I didn't feel like it was the relationship with them. I feel like had they had different pitching, it might have gone differently. But it felt like these two people were trying to play their characters so well to a T and had been coached so well on their characters. And then we're like, awesome. Okay. And now how to make it my own. And then when they tried to put those two pieces together, that puzzle didn't work.
There was one puzzle and you didn't solve it. You're like, oh, why? Why did you do that?
Oh, speaking of puzzles, can I just say I thought it was a little crazy that the final puzzle is just swim under a wall? Like, what? No one's done that this entire time? like, it's like the tide never not go down enough. Someone go, hey, wait a minute.
And we're doing gripes. I have technology. Why would we approach the technology in the way that we did? I've never seen Nathan Drake text ever. And like, I understand that we're supposed to see this character in 2020 and it's the way it is. But so you have them lose their bags. You have them have no access to it. And then Sully comes across like a safe or something. He presses it. It's like a hologram numbers. And he looks at it all confused. And freaking Tom Holland walks over and is like, oh, what? Like this? And then you've established that he's high tech and he knows what he's doing. But you don't have to sit there and talk about apps with Sully for 40 more seconds that I'm interested in each time, multiple times about the phone.
Yeah.
No, he said never close my apps. Yeah.
And you're like, you didn't have that in video games. I know, because it was made in the 90s. Like, you didn't have that, period.
No.
Like, there was no apps. There was
Get GPS.
Yeah,
At one point we get GPS in a jungle. And you're like, good luck. That's still not
you
that
barely had the internet. Let's talk about that. Yeah, and so I think one of the other things too was the fact that when he landed on the Spanish galleon and like Tom Holland was like looking up and he was like in there exploring, looking for the gold, then Sully comes up and then he's like, oh, where's the gold? And Tom Holland's like, oh, it's right here. It's covered in spice. And I'm like, how the fuck did you know that? Like, you just looked at it and you didn't even like how? And he was like, oh, it is what it is. And I'm like, that's not, like, normal people don't know that. Especially you, Tom Holland. Like, you don't know. And so that was a little weird for me. But then I think it was sort of like shadowed by the fact that like, oh, there it is, the gold's here. I'm going to steal all this. And then all of a sudden Tati comes in and then just freaking, let's just move the ships, like they're not going to fall apart. And I'm like, this wood is like hundreds of
I wasn't even concerned with the wood as much as I was the rope.
Right. I'm like, this wood would fall apart from wood rot, let alone like you all trying to haul it out on a freaking rope helicopter.
Swing it with some momentum and it just
swinging.
And it's not like, and these boats were exposed to the elements because we do see that there's just a big ass hole in the roof of the cave.
Not just that.
Maybe some trees.
Seawater, which is the most corrosive, most corrosive element, right?
But
like, it's not
it's
just
fine. You saw them; they're fine.
Which is why I was like, this is a video game movie. I get it. This is a video game movie. I get it.
Like that ridiculousness where you're like, what? And everyone's like, this is the only way. That is the crux for me of Uncharted games. Add in a puzzle to try to survive, and then that's Uncharted.
Yeah, absolutely. Friends, do we have any final thoughts on Uncharted, or is there anything that you all want to add to the conversation? Is there anything that you want to tell our viewers? Anything about that to go see it?
As scared as I am that this might get a sequel, I am excited because I feel like they'll give us an Elena, and I feel like the only thing that we know more about Nathan and his charisma is his hope. And I feel like we've seen the charisma side with Chloe. We know that he can hang in with the rest of them. But I think Elena is going to give us a side that's really going to round this Nate out a little bit, even if he's rough around the edges when he's younger. So I'm hoping if we get a sequel that Elena follows suit and that we can maybe bleach Marky's hair.
And at least he had the mustache at the end.
It's true. It wasn't white bread at that point. Like, we'd met a Cajun seasoning. Like, still not spicy. Not seasoned at all, but like, you've been adjacent to paprika.
What about you, Kenji? Any last thoughts on Uncharted?
Overall, it's fun. If you go into the theater, you will have fun, unless you're one of those people who's unable to. Unless
you're stupid.
But I mean, each to their own. But like, maybe some people are just really like will not be able to get past, Tom Holland being Tom Holland. Some people, or Mark Wahlberg being Mark. But I did at first, I'm not gonna lie, but ultimately as I saw the movie and I got through it, and by the end of it, I had a lot of fun. And that's ultimately what these movies are meant to do, is to have us a good time and be fun. So I recommend everyone go see it.
It was a fun adventure. It was a good time at the movies.
Yeah. When was the last time you saw a good adventure movie anyways? And if anyone says Crystal Skull,
that didn't exist. I don't know what you were talking about. But what is that? Is that coming out soon?
Who is she?
Speaking of which, Indy 5 is happening.
So Indy 4?
Right.
If Nathan Drake ever goes to Aliens, it's going to be the exact same feel for me.
Nice.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. That's all the time we have to talk today about Uncharted. It's been a wonderful adventure with my lovely and amazing guests, Jen and Kenji. Thank you all for joining us. It was wonderful meeting you, Kenji. I'm so excited to partner with you on anything else. Jen, it is wonderful to see you. You've gotten me drunk plenty of times on Geek Juice, and I'm so happy for you all to be here. Tell us where you can find each other. Kenji, where can we find you on the socials? Where can we find you out and about? What's going on?
Well, if you can find me on Instagram and on Instagram and on TikTok. It's at Kenjinator, which is KenJINATOR. You can also find me on Twitch as the Kenjinator. So what I just said, but with
the. And what about you, Jen? Where can we find you?
We're coming out with really fun, exciting Geek Juice material soon here in a sec. And if you're looking for a little old me, I am at Generally Doing on Instagram and I think Twitch now. So hopefully leave me messages there and I'll find them. It'll be like treasure.
Yes. So Nom Watch Review is now in a podcast form. Miss our live streams? Don't worry. You can listen to us on the next day on Google Podcasts, Breaker, Spotify, or wherever you subscribe to your podcast. So subscribe and review us, please. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/Nom Talk Network. Like us on Facebook, facebook.com/Nom Talk Network, as well as here on Twitch. I would like to give an amazing and wonderful and especially loud shout out to Stephanie, who's been our producer the entire time. Stephanie Sandmeyer, we love you. You're amazing. You give us the opportunity to do this stuff. You give us the light and love that we all need. So thank you so much. Tune into our next show, which is going to be a Nom Watch review tomorrow night. We're going to be doing The Queen of the Dam, hosted by yours truly. And we're going to be talking about all the Queen and all the Damned and all the gothic wonderfulness that it did to me in high school. Actually, it was probably middle school or whatever.
Bye. Thanks so much for joining us. Mwah.
It's a pleasure,
We love
you guys.
you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.